Folks joining in on LinkedIn, welcome to another Roundtable Talk. I'm Travis Duncan. I'm a principal at Daugherty Business Solutions, and my responsibility is focused on digital strategy, digital customer experience, and user experience. But today I'm joined with a bunch of thought leaders from Daugherty, and we're going to be talking about mobile and what mobile means to organizations in today's day and age. The reality is we're now 14 years past the launch of the original iPhone, and mobile is really just table stakes to a lot of organizations. Having mobile applications is a necessity. And so the question really becomes is how do organizations differentiate themselves? How do organizations really focus their investment in the right thing at the right time? And so that's what we want to talk about today. So I want to take a few minutes to introduce the thought leaders that are on our call, and then we'll get into a couple key questions that a lot of organizations are concerned with around the mobile space. So let's get started. Mike, if you want to do a quick introduction.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mike Palia. I'm also a principal consultant. I'm in the delivery leadership line of service, and my expertise is in product management and product ownership, and always focusing on what the customers need.
Excellent, thanks, Mike. Next we have Stu.
Hey everybody, my name is Stu Belshi. I'm a senior UX architect here at Daugherty. Similar to Mike, focus on users, have a long career in consulting and agency experience and mobile design development strategy, kind of run the gamut. So again, focus on users, try and provide the best solution possible.
Excellent, thanks Stu. Next we have Robert.
Hey everybody, my name is Robert Campo. I'm a senior consultant and application architect here at Daugherty in the software and engineering space.
Excellent, thanks Robert. And last but not least, Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Hilton. I'm also a senior consultant and application architect in the software architecture and engineering space, as well as the mobile competency lead.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. And thanks all of you for joining us. So let's get this thing started. I think the first question that's on the minds of a lot of organizations is, when do you go mobile? Obviously, mobile is a pervasive and prevalent part of the experience of almost every organization at this point. But the question is, when do you go mobile? And when you do go mobile, do you go responsive? Do you go native? How do you decide?
Hey, Travis, I'll kick that one off. I think a lot of companies now are just getting their hands around a mobile strategy. And I think what companies are figuring out is that you have to have a mobile strategy. It's table stakes now. And as consumers continue to move to a digital first experience, over 50% of users are now app first. It's got to be where you start, not where you move to.
I agree with you, Mike. And we've seen this evolution over the years of folks going from a situation where they felt like obviously their gut reaction was we had to be in the mobile space. We had to be in the mobile space. Well, what do you want to do in that space? And for a long time, it seemed like you had this drive to just replicate what you had online. Well, I'm going to have my web space mimic my mobile space. And, back to what was mentioned earlier, you trying to determine whether or not you went native or responsive and the opportunities you have to do something responsive and potentially replicate that web space, or do something native and really take advantage of what the phone and the mobile device offers to try and either enhance or change or increase the interaction there that you can offer users.
And building off that, doing things in a mobile native way does offer you a variety of additional features that you can't get from a web application. What can mobile bring to your customer that you can't get on a web or on a desktop? You've got a camera in your hand, where you're located. You have all these additional features that you can bring to that user for an enhanced experience, not just a copy of your desktop experience.
Yeah. One other thing, as you talked about, Travis, earlier, differentiators, and the way companies that are getting the most out of their digital investments, especially in mobile, is finding those problems where mobile actually improves the experience or makes the transaction simpler. And I think what we learned a long time ago was that e-commerce was the first friction point where mobile could really differentiate. I think what we're seeing now is companies leaning into in-store experiences. Verizon, Target are now, Home Depot, another place where a lot of companies are now using that mobile experience to help customers solve those problems that they have as quickly and simply as possible with the device that's already in their hand.
Right. Not just taking advantage of what the device may offer differently, but what the situation may offer differently for the user. Is speed critical? Is time to engage critical? Is repeat engagement critical? Changing the environment and changing the use case changes what you should be offering users.
Well, I think what you all hit on was it's really not a technology decision so much as it is a product and a business decision to determine, what and when to go mobile. And so let's tackle that a little bit more. How do you identify, and Stu and Mike, you hit on this, I think Lauren, you did as well, is that there's certain things that do make sense and certain things that don't. So what is it that we need to use to identify, what are the criteria, what are the things that you look at when you determine what to actually bring to a mobile device?
Yeah, I always think it's interesting, and we touched on this a little bit earlier. People's sort of first instinct is to replicate what they've done on the web. And there are often times where you can't offer something that's completely independent of what that web use or that web interaction may be, because whether or not it's taking a different look at their use case or taking a different look at the device, you don't just have to do the same thing. Again, kind of getting people to expand out of that space of just being there. Having an application and just being in the store doesn't finish the story. Whether or not you need repeat engagement or push notifications to move people back in through repeat use, again, it's a different engagement model. So you have to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and creating experiences where your users can get into the application on their mobile device, take care of what they need, and then get out and get back to what they were doing. Speed is critical.
And we're talking a lot of,
oh, go ahead, Lauren.
as I say, and we're talking a lot about users, but those users aren't always necessarily just your customers. Sometimes the thing that you can bring to your customers is an employee who has a mobile device that can help them in the store, or is able to disengage from behind their desk and engage with your customer for a better experience. And your employees are using that mobile application instead.
And I think that all comes back to understanding your target customer, right? And we don't always talk about target customers as like your market necessarily. It could be your internal employees, and understanding really what that journey is and what jobs they need to solve or get done within that journey. And I think that's where you can then use mobile as a solution, and a pointed way to solve a user problem or challenge. And in that way, you're really giving them something that enhances their experience or solves a problem for them.
Yeah, and more and more Daugherty clients are putting mobile devices in employees' hands to make things like that possible.
Well, I think that brings up a key point about the intersection or the ability to use technology not only to benefit the customers, but to benefit the employees and the associates of a particular organization, and that thereby doing that also probably benefits the customers as well. So it's kind of a cyclical journey. Is if you find ways to leverage mobile devices and mobile technology to benefit all of the different users within a particular ecosystem, you have the ability to benefit a lot of folks in a lot of different ways. Any other thoughts on what to bring to mobile before we move on?
I just want to make the note that as we're talking about mobile, a lot of times what we're talking about is mobile phones, but it's all mobile technology as well. What can you bring to your customer or your employee that's going to help them make their job faster?
And we tend to think of it as a delivery channel, not necessarily a unique piece of technology. And as Stu notes, it's like, how do you meet the customer where they are and provide them the solution where they need it, right? And if that happens to be a mobile device, great. If it's an iPad or some other tablet, I think, or on the desktop, if you think of that really now as just a large device, it's really making sure you're customizing this experience you want to solve that job as simply as possible.
I think you're right, Mike. And very often you get folks who fall in love with the idea of the native experience, when in a number of cases it's applicable and optional, but certainly not necessary. You can do responsive web and solve the same problems.
So in that, I'm hearing that mobile is part of a broader solution around the customer or employee experience. But the reality is technology is a key piece of that. And there are different technologies that can be or are used in a lot of different environments. So I think that leads us naturally to our next question, which is, what do you see the mobile space kind of moving towards in terms of technology, and what types of technologies are teams using?
We've talked a lot about mobile responsive versus native mobile. And I think up to this point, we've really been using that to distinguish, am I building a web page that I'm going to pull up on a browser on my phone, or am I building an app that you're going to download? But within that, there's a whole bunch of different technologies, especially on the native mobile side, that you can use. Are you going to build a hybrid mobile application? So one that you can write one set of code and build for multiple platforms? Are you going to build natively using what Apple and Google provide you? What's going to be the best fit in that respect?
Yeah, so there's pros and cons to each of what you just said. If you're going to go with a native solution, you will have to develop your application more than once, one for iOS, once for Android. Whereas if you use some of the cross-platform technologies that are available, there's a few, just to name a few. You got like React Native, you got Flutter, you got Xamarin with Microsoft. That could save time in the long run on the development side.
And from a UX perspective, I mean, obviously, in some ways, what we've put together is solution driven, but technology agnostic, right? I mean, but we look at the use case very differently, using your hands, using the scale of the device versus using your large desktop screen and your mouse. And then from a research side as well, how do you test those things? How do you put them out into the world, get feedback, iterate on those things, and continue to evolve that solution?
I think one of the things that's a big consideration is speed to market, right? I think the technology in the world is moving so quickly that you need to be able to position yourself with a technology that you can do, right? Like this has got to be feasible within your organization. And sometimes we may say that organizations get excited about a certain technology that actually increases the cost of their development because they just want a cool new technology to code in.
As Mike mentioned, thinking about what you have in terms of developers is important. We talked about those hybrid frameworks versus those native options for mobile applications. And a lot of times, one of the reasons that the hybrid frameworks are attractive to people is because if you've already got a bunch of React web developers, the shift from React to React Native isn't quite as big as a shift from React and JavaScript web to native iOS or native Android on the Google side of the house.
All right, so we've hit a little bit then on the technology, and I think even got a little bit into the specific skill set. So let's kind of dive a little bit deeper on that. Obviously, to build out meaningful mobile experiences, it requires certain technology. It requires underlying that technology, a team that can do all the things that are necessary to bring that product to market. And so I think the last question that we wanted to work in here was really around the team, the composition, the skill sets. Like, how do you build a really good team to accomplish that speed to market that Mike was mentioning? How do you put together the talent necessary to deliver the product end to end and get it to market quickly? So let's tackle that one.
I think you're right, Travis. This goes hand in hand with the last question you asked, right? You have to think about the team as you're picking the technology. If you have a team that's going to write in the technology, we're focusing on that. If we've picked a technology, now we have to pick a team, that it's the same kind of questions. Do you have web developers that are already on this team that want to do hybrid, or are you looking to do something more native? How many developers do you have available to you, right? If you're building native and you need it for both iOS and Android, you're potentially doubling your team size. You've got two different code bases.
And I think one of the things I see is that people overthink how to get started and may think, oh, well, I need a whole, 2 full stack teams just to get started in mobile development. In reality, you can start small and grow your team as you learn what else you need, right? So if you find the right use case and you are able to get value in the hands of your customers, then you can scale, right? And I think I think knowing where you want to scale to Lawrence Martin is important as well. So you don't have to change technologies, halfway through when you finally find, a product or a problem that you can solve.
And putting a design layer on top of that technology. I mean, obviously, just having a UI makes these things usable, but really focusing on the user, really being able to test and research and use sort of the core critical UX skills really can, aside from just technology, really evolve that experience.
Yeah, so I heard in that a lot of different things, that it's not just about building a team around the development group, which is obviously a key and critical piece, but there's a product aspect to it. There's an experience or user experience aspect to it. And so having all of those elements at whatever size or scale the team is absolutely critical to the success. It looks like we do have a little bit more time than I had thought. So I think we can work in another question, and that is, I'm kind of curious. So we've talked about building the right team. We've talked about the technology. We've talked about figuring out what it is that needs to be brought to market. But I want to pinpoint the piece that Mike had brought up, which is speed to market. Obviously, there needs to be some enablement layer to ensure that the teams can deliver in a rapid and effective process. So I'm kind of curious, what are some of the trends that you're seeing within the mobile space in terms of being able to bring the technology to market quicker? What are those enablement factors?
I'll talk from the business and the product side. One of the things I've seen most companies adopt is agile methodologies. This helps the team be very nimble and always going after whatever the next most important thing is, versus spending a lot of time trying to figure out everything they think the organization needs.
And from a visual standpoint, especially from a design and consumer face or focused standpoint, research and the ability to react and iterate on that research has been critical to the evolution of these, to where your first pass, your first iteration, we're not done. We continue to evolve as new feature sets, new pieces and new components come into your application. Again, you're not done. You're still iterating on what you've put out the first time and trying to improve on it as well.
Yeah, as an example, Stu, at one of our clients, a large financial company, we actually built a very small app and delivered it directly to one of the leaders in technology's phone. And we asked him, hey, is this going to work for you? Like, what else would you need to do your job or the job of the people in your organization? And he was so surprised about how quickly we could get working software into his hand, onto his device, so that he could say, wow, this is cool. Could you do X? And then we can say, sure, we can go do X and we'll try that out. And then you can put it on a few more people's device, and really using your internal organization as a sounding board for at least maybe your initial set of features, or an MVP, as some folks might call it.
It's a great example, Mike. You can always ask examples up front, do different surveys and things. And even when we do web testing, sitting in front of a machine gets great feedback, but there seems to be no better feedback that we get than when you can quickly develop an MVP of a product and put it in someone's hand on a mobile device. That seems to be the most reactive feedback that we get, and it's the most valuable.
As the mobile platform has matured a bit, one of the things you start seeing is the ability from, when you're developing software, there's more and more UI frameworks available to help bring something to life faster. And not only does it make things look nice, but it's easier to maintain. It's easier to develop new features with.
The technology also keeps improving for allowing for continuous integration and delivery for mobile applications, right? We can now, much more easily than we could a few years ago, take what the developer built and send it through an automated pipeline and push to somebody's phone for testing, so somebody on that client can see that application quickly.
Yep, and having the cloud at our fingertips makes that possible.
I think one thing I'll add, and I think what some companies forget is if you can't see the activity happening on your app, you're flying blind. So making sure that you think about analytics and any other monitoring tools you might need to ensure the experience is what you thought you built, right? Sometimes you get it out there and you think you've got something great, and then you realize, wow, nobody's actually clicked on that feature ever. And you're like, wow, we spent a lot of money on that feature. I'm wondering why nobody is using it.
This gets back to a little bit of what we touched on, especially around speed to market, is, we don't necessarily want to go for feature parity between our web and our mobile application, but there might be some situations where there are features that are common between them. And what technology do you already have that you can leverage to increase your speed to market? We're not starting over from scratch with a mobile application. It's a part of that greater experience. And how can we leverage what's already built to increase that speed?
Yeah, I think shared services and making things that aren't, channel specific enables a lot of speed to market in that case. So that's great. Any further thoughts before we conclude for today?
I think for me, I've always been a big proponent. I mean, obviously, selfishly, from a UX design perspective, from a user experience perspective, these decisions that you make are often based on business value. But I've always been a big believer, a huge proponent of you create business value by providing user value. If you're giving your users what they need to succeed, what they need to do, what they need to get done as quickly and easily as possible, you end up with that business value. You end up with that business value regardless of what the objective was.
And Stu, I'm going to echo that same thought. And what I'm going to add is the speed at which you can do that, right? So that sometimes it can take months to develop a more mature web app. Mobile can take weeks. And to your point, getting it in the hands of the customer, identifying that value and making sure that they can achieve that goal. And I always say, and they can do it sitting at their dinner table from their pocket, is a very interesting way when you can, be creating value or for your company or for your customer at midnight, 2 a.m. in Australia, in any country where you might be doing business. And it's a very different experience when humans are not necessarily always part of the value delivery.
And I would just say, making sure we as we close, the thing I think that always comes to mind for me is, where does mobile fit? It's not just about mobile. It's not just about any specific channel. It's about how do all those channels work together for that good experience? Because you can have a great mobile app, and if it doesn't integrate well with your other digital channels, you don't have the best user experience. You want to make sure that that user is having a good, seamless experience through all of their channels.
All excellent points, and I think those are great ways for us to wrap up. We talked about a lot of different things today, but I think we can summarize it by saying that mobile is part of a broader organizational strategy that enables the customers or the employees to get the greatest value that they can, which, and I think Stu, you hit on this, enables the organization to generate greater revenue as a result. And so for all of us here at Daugherty, we appreciate those that tuned in on LinkedIn. For the thought leaders on this call, thank you for your time. We look forward to having more of these in the future, and thanks everyone. Have a great day.